Hello, everyone. We're here with Jay, and we're just going to do a short interview. And Jay is a long-standing supporter of Tamil Solidarity, but she's also been an activist and a UCU member as well, which is the University College Trade Union. And Jay, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you for inviting me. And I'm going to start by apologising for my voice because I've got a cold, which I really hope I don't pass to you.
Well, hopefully not. But Jay, I was going to start off by asking a few questions about UCU member yourself. And I know that nationally, 60 higher education institutions, university and colleges have been on strike. But also in London, we've seen that 6 universities have been on strike itself. So can you explain a bit about why that dispute took place and what's your attitude towards it, but also what the people watching can do to help as well?
So the strike that happened was 8 days worth of strike, which ended on the 4th of December, which was the middle of last week. And as you said, Isai, it was 60 higher education institutes across the UK. And it was on 2 issues. The first was pay and conditions, including the huge issue of casualisation, so precarious contracts in the sector. And the second was about pensions. And my position, I'm very strongly supportive of the strike. And this is the first time in a long time that casualisation has been acknowledged as a serious endemic issue in the academic sector. And we have a great new General Secretary of UCU who is now really campaigning against that. And in terms of what people can do to support it, I think solidarity from other unions makes a massive difference. You know, so many of us are facing precarious working conditions, and to stand in solidarity is a huge thing.
The example, like you said, because you had a new leadership and a fighting membership, and that has given a bit of confidence to the new people watching by. And I think we had like 6,000 members recently who joined UCU as well as a result of the fact that it's a fighting union. And so we should definitely continue to support. And has there any more further dates announced?
So at the moment, further dates haven't been announced, I don't think. But what I would say was that this action was building on really strong and successful action at the beginning of last year, which could have been stronger. And because we were under a different kind of leadership then, I don't think we got there. But now we really face a fighting chance. And yes, it's to do with leadership, but it's also to do with all of us members. So you said new members coming in, people pushing within their branches, and being in solidarity. Like going on strike is a really difficult thing when you're so precarious. A really, really difficult thing. But we're stronger together than we are individually. So I think what's going to happen now is that those unions that weren't able to go on strike, and the reason some of them didn't, so for example SOAS in London, is because of the draconian Thatcherite legislation that came in, anti-trade union legislation that came in 2016, that meant that you had to get to a really high number of people participating in voting in the first place before you could then go on strike. So even if those who voted at a really high level to strike, if there weren't enough of them in the first place, you couldn't go on strike. Those institutions are reballoting their members, I think. And then the other thing is the success of the strike will be taken forward with further dates and further action and ongoing negotiations and campaigning.
Thank you, Jay. And like you said, I think trade unions in UK at the moment are the only institution that you require 50% turnout to make the results valid. And that's like, if you think about it, you won't have a council elected in this country with that kind of...
we don't have our Prime Minister elected.
Exactly. So it kind of shows extent to the government would go to cramp down on trade union rights as well. And I think in London, we certainly felt like a sea of industrial action taking place. RMT, Southern West Railways, are taking 27 days of action as we speak. And all of this is happening in the midst of the general election, which is on Thursday. And just wanted to ask you the question of who do you think the people watching should be voting for and why?
For me, there's really one clear answer, and that is the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn and Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. And there are two key reasons for that. The first is that this is as radical a manifesto under Labour as we have had for decades. And it's incredibly strong in terms of what it's going to deliver for us, the people living in this country, that we have just accepted generally as a population that we don't deserve to have, but in fact that we do deserve to have. And the second is that Tamil people watching this, Corbyn in particular, his leadership team, but especially he, has consistently stood behind and in support of Tamil rights, Ilam Tamil rights for self-determination and for justice. And because of that, I have absolute confidence that this would continue under a Corbyn-led Labour government.
Corbyn has a really proud record in terms of campaigning alongside not just the Tamil community, but also some of the oppressed communities as well. And he is seen as someone who is against racism and all sorts of oppression. But in the mainstream media at the moment, we're seeing a vicious attack on Jeremy Corbyn, accusing him of racism, accusing him, of being anti-Semitism, but not being able to deal with that and stuff like that. So why why is the media so offensive and going full on attacking Jeremy Corbyn on this particular issue?
It's a big question, and I'm not sure I can do it justice in this short interview. The first thing, you and I have just come from a meeting discussing some of these questions about Labour and the Labour campaign, and one of the things that was discussed was this, and one of the points that came up is that racism and anti-Semitism within that is a huge, embedded, serious issue across society, across British society, which any Tamil person watching will know from our everyday experiences. And of course, it's a huge issue in British society. We live in a country that was built on empire, on the racism and colonialism of empire, and that hasn't been addressed. So no one party stands outside of society. Of course, the Labour Party is affected by racism, but no more, and probably less, in my view, than the far right. And this, I think, we need to really understand and appreciate. The issue of anti-Semitism, well, I think there are a couple of things. I think that there are issues to do with, I'm not quite sure how to put this. There are issues in the left about, there are crude characterizations of Corbyn's politics, of Corbyn's foreign politics. And Corbyn himself and his leadership team have always unapologetically stood in favour of, stood for the rights of oppressed Palestinians who face extreme violence from the state of Israel. And this, Corbyn really stands out as the potential next leader of our country who will recognise this and who will not collude with the state of Israel's violence on this. And that, I think, creates a lot of fear in the establishment who don't want to recognise that. And so it's easy to sling mud and to say this is anti-Semitism when in fact you have Jewish organisations such as Jewish Voice for Labour and Jewish Socialists for Great Britain, which I would really encourage everybody to look at and read up about, saying, look, this is not anti-Semitism. Actually, what it's doing by focusing on this and saying Corbyn's position is anti-Semitic, what you're doing is you're taking a focus off the real issues of racism that we face. I think those who have worked on this issue for a long time or have experienced this issue for a long time have said racism and anti-Semitism within that is not about a few people having a few bad ideas or poor morals. It's a structural issue that manifests across time, across space, and so to try to make it just, about, or to not recognise that is really, really problematic. I think that while I say that anti-Semitism exists within racism, of course there are unique dimensions or specific dimensions to the different forms of racism that are experienced. I suppose to me, while needing to recognise that Labour, like any other part of society and party in society, should deal with that, we also need to acknowledge that Labour is dealing with that, and that Corbyn himself has always been actively anti-racist. This is whether he's standing for oppressed Palestinians, whether he's standing for the rights of Tamils for self-determination, whether he's standing up for indigenous Bolivians, which is how I first got to hear about him, way before he was leader of the Labour Party. So I think we just have to really